There's a specific feeling that happens on Sunday evenings. You know the one. You haven't done anything wrong. Nobody's mad at you. Nothing bad happened. But somewhere around 6 or 7 p.m., something shifts. A low hum of dread starts to settle in. Monday is coming. Most of us treat that feeling as normal, just part of being an adult, part of having a job, part of life. But here's something that started bothering me. For the vast majority of our time on this planet, humans didn't live like this. And at some point, I started wondering, why the hell does our entire life revolve around schedules? We don't really question it. The 40-hour week, the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. We grew up watching our parents do it. We went to school to prepare for it. We spend most of our lives inside it. Nobody ever really asks where this rhythm came from. It's just there. School, work, weekends, vacations. Everything ends up on a calendar eventually. After a while, it stops feeling like a system. It starts feeling like nature, which also means when the system hurts, we assume the problem is us, and listen to the way we talk about ourselves inside it. We say we're behind. We try to catch up. We optimize our mornings. We time block our calendars. We squeeze productivity out of weekends, and somehow even rest becomes another thing to do efficiently. If you struggle with any of this, if you're exhausted, distracted, if you can't figure out why every hour disappears and you still feel behind, we assume something is wrong with us. Maybe we're lazy. Maybe we're undisciplined. Maybe we just need a better mindset. Gallup surveys hundreds of thousands of workers every year, and only about 23% say they're actually engaged with their work. The other 77% are either checked out or actively unhappy. We look at that and think, well, maybe that's just what work feels like. But then something occurred to me. If this is really just part of being human, we'd expect to see something like it everywhere. Do chimpanzees live by a schedule? Do bonobos? I didn't know. So I started looking. Our closest living relatives are chimpanzees and bonobos. We share about 98.7% of our DNA with both of them, which means if there's something deeply human about living by a schedule, you'd expect to see at least traces of it in them. So what do chimpanzees actually do with their time? They wake up, they find food, they eat, they rest, they groom each other, they rest some more. Jane Goodall spent decades watching them at Gombe, and what she found was that chimps spend roughly 6 to 7 hours a day finding and eating food, broken up by long stretches of doing almost nothing. No schedule, no deadline, no meeting at 9, just tasks. When the task is done, they stop. Bonobos are similar. Researchers tracking them in the Lomako forest found they spend about 40% of their day resting, not sleeping, just resting, sitting, being. And here's what struck me. These animals aren't lazy. They're healthy. They're social. They live full lives. Time doesn't tell them what to do next. Now, we share almost all of our DNA with these animals, but somewhere between them and us, something changed. So what happened? January 5th, 1914. That's the date. Before that day, there was no standard. Every factory had its own rules. Workers worked whatever their owner demanded. 10 hours, 12 hours, sometimes more, 6 days a week. Now, Henry Ford had just built something remarkable, the assembly line. It cut the time to build a Model T from 12 and a half hours down to 93 minutes, 12 times faster, one of the most efficient machines ever invented. The assembly line had already solved the productivity problem. Now he had to solve the people problem, because the people running that machine kept leaving. In 1913, Ford hired over 50,000 workers to maintain a workforce of about 13,000, a turnover rate of 370%. He was replacing his entire workforce nearly 4 times a year. Because the work was unbearable, one worker's wife wrote to Ford directly, "The chain system you have is a slave driver. My husband has come home and thrown himself down and won't eat his supper. So done out." So on January 5th, 1914, Ford made an announcement. 8 hours a day, $5 a day, 8 hours instead of 12, and double the pay. Workers stopped leaving. Within a year, Turnover dropped from 370% to 16%. It worked, and Ford wasn't being generous. He was solving a math problem. Everyone else saw the results. Factory by factory, industry by industry, the 8-hour day spread. By 1938, it became federal law in the United States, not because it fit human biology, not because someone studied how people actually work best, but because it solved a retention problem for one car company in Detroit. And then the whole world copied it. That's where the 8-hour day came from. But here's what I kept thinking about. Ford didn't invent schedules. He standardized one of them. So where did that come from? When did time stop being something humans used and start being something that used them? For most of human history, it didn't. Work didn't end at a specific hour. It ended when the task was done, the field harvested, the bread baked, the cow milked, the net mended. You stopped because the work was finished, not because a clock reached a certain number. Historian E.P. Thompson called this task-oriented labor. The working day, he wrote, lengthens or contracts according to the task. And he argued this was more humanly comprehensible than what came next. Then the Industrial Revolution happened. Factories needed synchronization. Machines couldn't wait for you to finish at your own pace. Everyone had to start and stop together, so they built bells. A bell rang. Thousands of people moved. Another bell rang. They stopped. And here's the real shift Thompson noticed. The moment workers were employed by someone else, time itself changed ownership. His exact words. Time is beginning to become money, the employer's money. Not your time anymore. Their time. In many trades, shoemaking, weaving, printing, people simply didn't show up on Mondays. It even had a name, Saint Monday. They weren't protesting. They were still living by an older rhythm, the older calendar refusing to die. But the bells won, and now we all live inside what they built. It's become so normal that it's hard to imagine people ever living any other way. But they did. So what did that actually look like? It turns out there are still people who never fully made that switch. One of them is a group called the Kung San. They live in the Kalahari Desert in Botswana, and for decades, anthropologists look to them as one of the closest available analogies to how humans once organized everyday life. Their days weren't organized around a clock. They were organized around what needed to be done. In the 1960s, a researcher named Richard Lee decided to actually count what that looked like. He spent months living with them, watching what people did with their time. Adults spend about 15 hours a week acquiring food. Critics pointed out that Lee hadn't counted food preparation. Fair. When you add that in, the number rises, somewhere between 40 and 45 hours a week. But here's the remarkable part. Those 40-odd hours had no fixed schedule, no start time, no end time. Work happened when it needed to happen, and when it was done, it was done. In 2019, researchers studied the Acta, a hunter-gatherer group in the Philippines. Those who had switched to farming worked about 10 hours more per week than those who hadn't. Agriculture, the thing we call progress, made people work harder, not less. And when someone asked a Kung man why he didn't farm like his neighbors, he answered simply, "Why should we when there are so many mongongo nuts in the world?" And yet, you know that feeling when you sit down to do nothing, and almost immediately a voice starts up. I should really do that today. I'll do it later. I've wasted the whole day. I can't just sit here. The Kung man never would have understood that voice, so where does it come from? In the early 1900s, a sociologist named Max Weber asked himself the same question. Why did work feel like a moral issue? Why did rest feel like failure? He started digging, and what he found went back centuries to a religious movement called Calvinism, and a very uncomfortable idea at its core. The idea was basically this. Calvinists believed God had already decided who was saved and who wasn't. You couldn't change that, but you could look for signs, and one of the clearest signs was relentless, disciplined work. Idleness wasn't just laziness, it was spiritual danger. The American Puritan minister Cotton Mather said it plainly, "Find employment for them, set them to work, and keep them at work." Those ideas didn't stay in the church. Over time, they spread into factories, schools, corporations, the entire culture your parents raised you in. Weber's conclusion was unsettling. The religion didn't just shape how people worked, it shaped how people felt when they weren't. He called what remained the iron cage. The religion faded. The guilt didn't. But beliefs are one thing. Bodies are another. Maybe you're thinking, okay, but humans adapt. We've been living like this for hundreds of years. Surely our bodies have caught up by now. That's what I thought too. They haven't. Matthew Walker has spent decades studying what sleep deprivation does to the human brain. What he found is this: when you don't get enough sleep, and many people living on a modern schedule don't, the part of your brain that processes fear and threat becomes about 60% more reactive, and the part that keeps you calm starts losing its grip. Things get to you more easily, you're more reactive, less in control, and that's just sleep. The deeper problem is what happens when the stress never switches off. Your body has a stress response. It was built for short bursts of danger, a predator, a threat, a moment of crisis. Cortisol spikes, you deal with it, cortisol drops. But when that system stays on, not for minutes, but for years, it starts breaking things. In 2021, the World Health Organization linked long working hours to over 745,000 deaths from heart disease and stroke in a single year. Not work itself, what we've turned work into. Your body is still running the old operating system, the one built for tasks, for rest, for a pace that no longer exists. There's an obvious objection here, and it's worth taking seriously. We live longer than any humans in history. Child mortality has collapsed. Violent death is rare. We have medicine, food security, the ability to communicate across the world in seconds. I'm not trying to romanticize the past. I like modern medicine. I like electricity. I'm not suggesting anyone go back. And to be fair, life back then wasn't paradise. A lot of people died young. Infections that we treat with a single pill could kill you in days. There were no safety nets, no anesthesia. So this isn't an argument for going back. The problem was never that we work. It was never that we build systems and specialize in trade. Those things are real achievements. The question is narrower than that. We built a system, then expected our bodies to fit inside it. Maybe we've been asking the wrong question. So here's what I think the right question looks like. Not, why can't I keep up? Not, why am I so tired? Not, what's wrong with me? But what am I being asked to keep up with? Because the exhaustion isn't a character flaw. The guilt isn't weakness. The Sunday dread isn't irrational. It's a clue. Most of the things we accept as just the way life is don't begin where we think they do. The Sunday dread didn't start on Sunday. The guilt didn't start with you. The schedule didn't start with work.